What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. We continue with our 2025 predictions for the upcoming 2025 college football season. Up next is the Cincinnati Bearcats. Cincinnati coming off a little bit of an improving season last year in 2024. This team, I think a couple of years ago, they went 3-9 in Scott Satterfield's first year. And then second year, they actually won a couple more games compared to where they were a couple of years ago. They went 5-7, so yeah, they came up just short of making it to a bowl game. So you thought with that improvement from last year, this could be the finally the year where Cincinnati could make it to a bowl game in 2025. The problem is though, I really am not high on this Cincinnati team. I think this team will actually be competitive in some of their games this year. Maybe they'll be having like a pretty good shot to win some of those games where they're pretty even, and then some of the games are probably going to be underdogs in them. But you look at this team for 2025. My thoughts on this team. First off, Brendan Sorsby is back at quarterback. So yeah, he's coming off a pretty decent year for Cincinnati last year. I think he does develop something in the passing game for this team. Offensive line, though, I think is a big concern for Cincinnati. They don't really have a ton of depth there, so that's the one area I'm concerned about it at wide receiver. They have a lot of new faces coming in from the transfer portal. Defensively, I think the defensive line could be the strength of the defense. The linebacker position is also a big concern there on that defensive side of the football. So yeah, Cincinnati I think is going to be a solid team across the board, and I think they'll be competitive, but it's just going to be really hard to find the wins for this team. And here's a schedule for them in 2025, and again, they were 5-7 last year in 2024, so let's go game by game, and I'll give you my official prediction for this Cincinnati Bearcat football team for 2025. They'll open things up on a Thursday night, August 28th, against Nebraska out of the Big Ten. This game, of course, will be in Kansas City. So a neutral site game to kick off for the Bearcats. I did pick Nebraska here to win this game already. Dylan Raiola is a quarterback that I do trust a lot more than Sorsby as of right now. Nebraska is a team that's got some talent. They're going to be pretty talented on both sides of the football, and I think Matt Rule kind of is a great coach here for Nebraska as of right now. The first couple of years for him, they haven't been the greatest. They've been like, a 5-7 and 6-6 season, but I think he's got something going for this Nebraska team in the future. I think Cincinnati actually will be competitive in this game, but I think at the end of the day, though, I do trust Nebraska. I do trust Dylan Raiola to make explosive plays, and I also do trust Matt Rule as the head coach as of right now. So yeah, I think Nebraska does beat Cincinnati here, and I saw the time for this game. It's going to be a 9 o'clock tip-off, or actually not a tip-off, but a kickoff is what I meant to say. So yeah, Nebraska, I think, does win that game. That game, of course, will be on a Thursday night, and I got Cincinnati starting off 0-1, but then I got them beating Bowling Green and Northwestern State. Bowling Green, a pretty solid team out of the MAC. Sometimes they're competitive in some games, but I think Cincinnati will win that one pretty easily. And then I think they beat Northwestern State. That's an FCS team, so I got this team now getting off to a 2-1 start. And going into conference play, they get a bye week before playing on the road here at Kansas on September 27th. So how about that? They travel to Kansas City, there on the Thursday, and then they come back here to play Kansas here on September 27th. So this is the second time that they're traveling out to the state of Kansas. You look at this Kansas team, though, I feel like they're going to be a little bit better compared to where they were last year. Jalen Daniels, obviously, back at quarterback is a big, spark for this team. And I think overall, Kansas doesn't have a lot of talent, but they are a team that I think will be a little bit better this year. I think Cincinnati coming out of the bye week is going to help them be competitive in this one, but still, I'm going to go with the Jayhawks just because they're playing at home, and that's really the difference here. Home field advantage will be the difference, so I'm going Kansas here in this one. So that's going to drop now Cincinnati to 2-2, and then after that, they'll play at home against Iowa State on October 4th. Two pretty similar teams. Iowa State definitely has a much more better roster than Cincinnati does, but you look at the wide receiver position, they have a lot to replace there with both teams at the wide receiver position. So yeah, who do I trust more here at quarterback? I feel like the receivers for Cincinnati are definitely more better than Iowa State's, but I think the physicality of this Iowa State team is just going to be too much here for the Bearcats, and also coming off that road game against, Kansas last week, maybe they had a competitive game, and they probably come in a little bit beat up in this one. So yeah, I think Cincinnati does make this a close game. It probably is one of those upset alert type games where the Cyclones are probably in the top 25, but I don't think it's going to be enough. So I'm going Iowa State here to win this game over Cincinnati. That's going to drop the Bearcats now to 2-3. And then after that, they'll play at home against UCF on October the 11th. A potential winnable game here for Cincinnati. UCF, kind of a similar team. Not really a similar team to Cincinnati, but a team that's definitely going to have a lot of new faces on both sides of the football. And you got Scott Frost taking over as, the head coach here for UCF again. This is kind of a tough one here to call. I think it's a pretty even matchup, but I think Cincinnati playing at home, they finally get their first win of the season here in the Big 12, and I think they beat UCF here in a pretty competitive game. So I'm going Bearcats in that one. That's going to put them now at 3-3, and then they go back on the road to play Oklahoma State on October 18th. I've had a ton of question marks here about the Cowboys ever since the start of the offseason back in the month of January. This is just a team that is really tough to figure out right now. I mean, both sides of the football, they do still got some playmakers, but are they going to be able to turn things around? And, it's a Mike Gundy team, so maybe they can turn things around, but not become a potential dark horse team and also a contender in the Big 12. I think it's going to be a pretty tough year for Oklahoma State, but this is on the road here for Cincinnati, and I think it's a pretty tough place to play, and I think it's really a back-and-forth kind of toss-up game. So I'm actually going to go with the Cowboys here in this game. I think it's, again, just a toss-up for me, and also the fact that it's on the road. That's kind of what makes this prediction a little bit tricky here for Cincinnati, but I think Cincinnati will come up short here in this game. So yeah, while I think Cincinnati can have a chance to win that game, I think Oklahoma State playing at home, again, that's just a very tough place to play. So I've got to go with Cincinnati to lose this game. That's going to drop them now to 3-4. Then they play at home against Baylor on October 25th. A Baylor team that's going to have a lot of production coming back this year, and this is definitely one of the top dark horse teams in the Big 12 in my opinion. I think Cincinnati can make this a competitive game though, because Baylor doesn't have a lot of talent as well, but they do have experience. And I think that probably is what the difference here in this game is going to be. It's probably experience of Baylor. I think it's what it's going to catch up here to the Bearcats. So yeah, although I think Cincinnati does make this a close game, but I'm going to go with the Baylor Bears to win this game just because of the experience, and I do trust their quarterback a lot more as well. So I got Baylor beating Cincinnati here at home. That's going to drop the Bearcats now at 3-5. And then they go on the road to face Utah on November 1st. So they're playing the couple of, the worst teams in the Big 12 from last year in Oklahoma State and Utah. Do they have a chance to probably win one of these two games? Maybe they do, but Utah is a very tough place to play. Plus, they have to travel out west, so that's always tough to do when you got to travel out west. And how many times did we see that last year? We saw teams that traveled out west. They always tend to struggle, so I think Cincinnati does struggle here against a pretty physical Utah team. And I think Utah is probably going to turn things around this year more than Oklahoma State does. And I think the Utes do get the win, so I got Cincinnati dropping there to 3-6. So they have to win their final 3 games in order to make it to a bowl game. They finally get a bye week before playing Arizona at home. Pretty good spot for a bye week after you traveled out west there from November 1st. You get that that second bye week before playing Arizona, a team that's also out west, but they do get this one at home. So I think that does favor Cincinnati here quite a bit in this one. I think Arizona might be a little bit better this year, but still, I think Cincinnati playing at home is probably going to get it done in this one. They're kind of desperate to win some games here down the stretch, and I think they do take care of Arizona. Not take care of, I think it's going to be a pretty close game, but I'm going to go with Cincinnati here in that one. That's going to put them here at 4-6, but then they play BYU at home here on November 22nd. This is going to be a pretty tough game in my opinion for the Bearcats to win. I know there's a lot of parity in the Big 12 and a lot of priority here in the Big 12. The games will be definitely close, and you could really expect an upset anywhere to happen in this one. maybe it's one of those games here. Cincinnati probably comes in a little bit competitive, but still, I think the experience of BYU is just a little bit too much. It's kind of similar to the Baylor game. Jake Ratcliffe is a quarterback that I do trust a lot more, the Cincinnati quarterback, in my opinion. So I think BYU actually gets the win here. So I'm going to go with Cincinnati to lose that game. So that means no bowl game this year. That does drop them to 4-7. And then they close things out on the road at TCU on November 29th. TCU team that I think will be pretty solid across the board. I think these two rosters are actually pretty even, in my opinion, but TCU is playing at home. That's really the difference here, home field advantage. I think TCU is kind of a more physical team in Cincinnati, if that does make sense, and they are definitely the well-coached team. So I think TCU does get the win here to close things out here on November 29th, but I think it will be a competitive game, probably a low-scoring defensive game, but I got Cincinnati finishing 4-8 in 2025, so although I think this team will be a little bit better this year, I still got this team going 4-8. They do have a pretty tough schedule. It all starts with that Nebraska game in the non-conference, and then you got some pretty tough road games with Oklahoma State and Utah. Those are the two teams that were the worst teams in the Big 12 last year, but you never know. Those two teams can probably turn things around, but what if they win some of those two games? What if they go 5-7? That wouldn't shock me there. Maybe they can pull off an upset against BYU or Iowa State or Baylor. I mean, those three teams, if they can win at least one of those three games and then beat someone on the road in Oklahoma State and Utah, this team can absolutely get to 6-6 in my opinion, but I think 4-8, 5-7, 6-6 probably your most likely records for this team, but I'm going to go with 4-8. So that's my prediction here for the Bearcats for 2025. Do you guys agree or disagree with this prediction? And give me your prediction for Cincinnati down in the comments below. Thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports YouTube channel.